Hello and welcome to the Monday, February 28th, 2011 City Council Informational. We'll call the meeting to order. We are missing our city clerk, so we'll bypass our City Council staff report. We'll move right into our City Council open discussion. Well, maybe perhaps before we start that, if we could get an update from Councilor Brown on our last fiscal committee meeting.
We met on Friday here in the chambers to start with to talk about the contracts, and a couple of things that we did resolve to do. First of all, Scott Rust in Finance is going to watch and keep tabs on the contracts for the next month, the next 30 days, and then present to the council so we begin to get a breadth and depth of the contracts going through the city so we can better understand what we don't know probably. Scott also gave a great presentation on where agreements are housed on the website today and how you can get to those. In the end, I assigned Deborah Owen, Rich Oaksel, Attorney Fifley, and Scott Rust to work together. We gave them some boundaries on what to put together for consideration by the Fiscal Committee, which would include, and this is all open to change, it'll come back to the Council and Fiscal Committee in draft form, but looking at all contracts over bid amount coming to Council, and including especially the facilities, those being pulled to the council immediately, and we'll take a look at that and see where we can compromise from there. But the discussions have been very good, frankly. I think that we all, and when I say all, I mean the council and administration, recognize the need for more transparency here and a firm policy instead of just directors deciding on their own. It's also protection for them, I think, so they all know what contracts clearly come to the council and what don't. So it was a good discussion. I think we're heading in the right direction, and I'm anxious to see the results of that committee we assigned putting that ordinance together. And then following that, we went over to the health department to do a video conference on Finance had asked us to visit with the consultants who are putting together the needs assessment and RFP for accounting and land management software. Our systems are more than 20 years old. They're inadequate, and the discussion was about what return on investment we will get as a result of focusing on this and getting that done beginning this year. But this is not something that's going to be resolved easily. It's going to be a 3-year process, and making sure that all the systems in city government talk to one another and perform efficiently, and hopefully getting rid of some of the duplicate services that have to happen as a result of old systems or systems that don't work well together.
Any questions for Councilor Brown or any of the others on the Fiscal Committee? Okay. Any other open discussion items? Well, I suppose we ought to just do it during open discussion. Well, wait, I'll save that. I do have one item that I wanted to cover. Last Friday, I got a phone call from a person who lives in the Whittier neighborhood, right next door to a home that was burned on Waltz Avenue. And I come to learn that the whole neighborhood is actually coming together to tear down this house that was that caught fire and rebuild it for this individual at no cost, as I understand it so far. And the neighbors are all coming together to do this for this gentleman. And he called me asking if we would be willing to waive the fees at the landfill when they tear down the old house, and they've hired, or I think it's Friesen Construction, agreed to haul it all away. But they were just looking for the city to waive the fees to dispose of the debris. And I had a minute to talk to Councilor Anderson, and then I've come to learn that Russ Sorensen is working with the neighborhood with a meeting this week. There's Russ. Geez, I was looking all around. There he is, right there. Maybe, Russ, if you could fill us in with some of the particulars, but what I'm trying to maybe share with the rest of the councilors is that here's a great example of a community, the whole neighborhood, it sounds like, coming together to help a guy who needs help. And the city has participated, as I understand it, in a lot of ways, but maybe just one loophole left, and that would be at the landfill. And I'm trying to figure out a way that the council could enact something or create something where, in cases like this, where it's clearly a community and a charitable organization, if there's a way for the city to help further, other than the ways that you're already doing, that and waiving the landfill fees would be a way that we could help be a part of that whole neighborhood effort. I would like us to try to find a way. It's like $1,500 is what they estimated the cost to be. So it's not like it's a lot, but it'd be a help. Russ, if you have any other comments, maybe to help us.
You covered that well, Commissioner Jameson. Russ Sorensen with the City Planning Office. And there's several city departments that have been involved with that, City Attorney's Office, Public Works, and Planning and Building Codes and so forth. And there will be a meeting of code enforcement team this Wednesday afternoon in which that particular item will be discussed. And we'll have more information at that time that will be presented and understanding the facts and where we can perhaps proceed further in a community service effort for that neighborhood, in that particular neighborhood.
So we'll know more after Wednesday, but I wanted to bring that up just as discussion items if you had any thoughts or opposition or maybe ways that it's been done in the past, and we could just exercise that again. But Councilor Aguilar.
Well, I guess my question is, has it been done before, and how do we do it?
That'll be part of our fact-finding discussion, if you will, for that particular code enforcement team meeting.
Perfect. That'll help a lot. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, a couple other items, if I could. We need to express a happy birthday to Cannon Tucker, which is Denise's dad. Denise is with her dad. So happy birthday, Cannon. But also we need to do maybe a shout out here to Bob Litz. This is our last full force council in action at the Informational. Next time we'll be without one of our counselors, and we'll be a 7-man crew. And we'll be working on replacing Councilor Litz. But I wish I had a whole list of roasting items we could do for Bob. But I didn't have all the time to put a roast together. But Bob, any final thoughts maybe for us during open discussion that you're wanting to share with us? Put you on the spot, maybe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I really don't. I just want to thank everybody on this council, and councils past and people that are on the staff in the city and other people that come to this audience. I've really enjoyed it. I love people. I love meeting people. I've made some lifelong friendships, even those that we don't agree with all the time. I had a counselor that I saw last Thursday that I used to disagree with quite strongly. We sat down and talked for a half an hour, and it was because of this place here. And, the other thing that I would say is that it's been a little bit humbling that, sometimes you come down here and you've got the best of resources and you got the best of intentions and you got some of the finest people bringing information to you and you've got lots of time to decide, and at the time you decide something, you feel good about it and you just think, boy, we did the right thing and we're moving this city ahead. And then 3 years later, you kind of look at it and I don't know how we could have done better, but it just isn't working out quite the way we thought it would. But I guess that's just life, and that was, if there's one thing I learned from this city council, it is that be humble and, in all your things and try to just do the best for the city, and it might work out for you.
And I know, Bob, you'll be joining us during our joint county meetings, right? You'll be actually...
the current auditor would come to those if there was a matter that involved her directly, but it is my intention to become a little bit more, active and out front with the auditor's office and to attend a few more public functions than my predecessor had chosen to do. That was certainly her style, and my style being what it is. I just hope to continue to promote the good relationship that the city and the county has, and the good works that we do together, and accentuate those things, because I think there's more to come. I think that people do want governments, bodies to coalesce and keep out of the duplication of services where we can, and to combine forces, to put things forward when we can. economize in that way. And that's what I'm going to be looking for. And while I'm not the decision maker or the decider, I certainly would advocate for those sort of things. So I want to thank you people in the audience who are out here tonight, and those who aren't here, and those people that I've gotten to know. It's been wonderful, and you've really educated me a lot, and I'm grateful for that.
Well, there'll always be a chair here for you, Bob, when you come back for those joint meetings. Anything else? If not, we'll move on to our presentations. Our first presentation is two internal audit reports with Rich Oaksel. Welcome, Rich.
Good afternoon, Council. Rich Oaksel, Internal Audit. You should have two hard copies at your station there. The first one we'll talk about is the ARRA, that's the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act audit, and it's popularly known as the stimulus funds. And basically, this was just an audit to find out what the city is doing with those funds, and if we have the controls in place to meet the extra requirements. And when you accept federal dollars, there's always strings attached. Yeah, you can't get away from that. And with the stimulus funds, those strings were longer and more complicated than previous federal awards. We found that some of these requirements were a moving target, and when I was interviewing some of the staff about how they meet the requirements, there was some frustration expressed once in a while about trying to get guidance from the agency that provided the funds, like how do we meet this requirement, and sometimes they would say, well, just here's the reference, look it up, and they'd say, I know what the reference is, how do I implement that? And so that was a frustration with staff once in a while. And sometimes it was a moving target. With the stimulus fund, it was had a lot of media attention nationwide. A couple of the requirements sort of changed in the last couple of years. One had to do with signage. At first, it was understood that there was a requirement to have a sign if you had a public works project that was funded by the stimulus fund to have a certain signage. And then the guidance sort of backed off on that. And then the other controversial requirement had to do with reporting of jobs created. And then there was nationwide there was problems with that, with the methodology that wasn't maybe consistent, some controversy about that. So the requirements changed so that agencies had to report jobs funded instead of jobs created. But for the most part, we found that the city is complying with the various requirements. On Appendix 1 of your report in the back, it kind of lists those special requirements and what controls the city had in place to meet those requirements. One thing we found that we were deficient in, and management was very quick to respond, was our website needed to be updated. Some of the departments hadn't updated their information there in quite some time. So when we met with management, they immediately asked the departments to update their part of the city website. And another requirement was there was no indication of whistleblower, hotline to call if they suspected fraud or mismanagement of funds. There's a Inspector General hotline that's supposed to be referenced on your website, and so they put that on there. And so we got that taken care of. And then there was also supposed to be a link on the city website to recovery.org, which is the federal website, which is kind of the national clearinghouse for all the information. So they put that link on there so that if a citizen were looking at City of Sioux Falls, the projects, they could also have an immediate link to the federal website. We did look at what the city had done with the funds, and on page 6 and 7, we briefly summarized what the city is doing with the funds, and also in Appendix 2, we listed what the city is doing. For example, community development used the money for a furnace replacement program. I think there was, if I recall, there was about 83 low-income homeowners that had furnaces replaced. They got rid of the old energy inefficient furnace with a brand new energy efficient furnace, and that's one project. Last week, Mark Cotter and his team talked to you about what the city did with the some of that energy efficient recovery grant money. For example, changing out the bulbs on the traffic signals to the more energy efficient LED bulbs. The police department is hiring police officers, and the health department had a number of projects to provide more services to the public. So the list is in your report there. As I said, the one deficiency, or the several deficiencies that we noted were immediately, as soon as we brought it to attention of management, they corrected that. So we're happy to report that we had no issues with that. So if there's any questions about this audit, I'd be happy to answer those questions.
Councilor Olfing.
I see here two things that we talked about before. One was hiring 9 more police officers with this money and hiring dental professionals. How many were hired?
I believe it was a dentist and I think 2 technicians, if I'm correct. Yeah.
Are these, I know we talked about this with Chief of Police, and I don't know if we've done the same thing with the health department about ongoing funding for these.
Yeah, and that was a consideration because the risk of taking federal funds to fund FTEs is the federal money goes away at some point. And then what? Do you have to fire him? When I talked to Director Franken at the Health Department, she assured me that she believes she has additional funding, that the funding would continue. She's very familiar with federal programs because much of her funding for the health and dental clinic comes from the federal government. So she did consider that a big risk, that she would be able to find funds to keep those positions in place. And then the police chief too felt that there was not a danger of having to fire people in 2 years because there weren't funds available. It was sort of money that they were planning to hire the police officers anyway, and the stimulus funds came available, so they used that to fund. But they always had the intention of having these new police officers. So
Okay,
yeah,
thank you.
We thought about that. Yes.
Okay, Rich, we can go on to the next one, I guess.
Okay, the next one's a much shorter report. They're citywide disbursements. This is something I think this is our 3rd annual report. It's something we put in the plan every year. We always try and take a statistical sample of disbursements, and I think in this case, we looked at 42 disbursements that gave us a statistically valid sample. Looking to see if these disbursements were for authorized purposes, if they're compliance with laws, procedures, and policies, if they had proper documentation, and if they were properly recorded within the city financial records. We had no issues there, no audit findings with that random sample of disbursements. We found everything to be in order. And then we always try and pick a special area every year. We try to rotate that. In the past, we've looked at natural gas bills, for example, to see that a sample of natural gas bills were actually for city properties and were billed at the proper rates approved by the PUC. This year, we happened to decide to look at the traffic signals in the city. I think we had I believe we had about 238 traffic signals. That's kind of a moving target. We're constantly adding traffic signals. We kind of looked at to make sure we have we could find a bill for every traffic signal, and that we didn't have any anomalies there. But we did find some issues with the traffic signals. For example, we found a meter that was actually on this building at 235 West 10th Street. We found an Xcel Energy bill for this building, and it was charged to the traffic signals. Well, the traffic signals out here on the corner are municipal power. They're not from Xcel. So that was one issue. We had a couple of addresses that looked kind of strange. We couldn't figure out what they were for. In fact, I sent one of my staff auditors out to look at a couple of addresses that were on the bill. One was way north on Cliff, past the interstate. I think it was like north 72nd Street. It was on a gravel road. He went out there, kind of drove up and down, and judging by the address on the bill, he couldn't find what would be a city meter. So we had a few odd things like that where, is this really a city meter, or a case of, it's probably a city meter, but it's probably being charged to the wrong department. So we met with the traffic engineers, and they're very receptive to our findings. We'll follow up with them on trying to kind of clean up all these utility bills. You can imagine with that many utility bills, there might be some errors, things that kind of creep in over time that just kind of get paid every month or so and may need to be looked at. There's also a potential cost savings for the city. If you have a meter, you're getting charged, I think, for example, $8 a month just to have a meter there, whether you're using any electricity or not. So we thought there could be some potential cost savings, especially with new construction, if you could just put one meter and that would cover a number of lights or a number of traffic signals, that there's some potential cost savings there. So we'll continue to follow up with management. They are receptive, as I said, to our findings, and we're interested in what we've come up with. So we'll just keep tabs on that. So are there any questions on this particular audit?
Any questions for Rich? Councilor Anderson.
I've got a question. This may be more for the city clerks. Do we have on our schedule an informational where the IRS audit is going to be discussed?
I'd have to look and see. I don't know right now.
Okay.
I'll check on it for you.
The reason I was asking is one of the things under results here was payroll and pensions, and
Yeah.
but you don't do an exacting accounting. You do more
No.
of just a
Yeah, we
a
usually
review,
typically do a
correct?
random sampling of disbursements in general. I think that when we do this audit this year, I think we're going to probably take a sample of payroll, so focus on payroll this year. We try to kind of rotate that coverage.
Okay, thank you.
All right, very good, Rich. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Our next presentation is on code enforcement. It's an update from Kevin Smith. Old Smiley, we call him. Look at that smile, see?
That's a tough lead-in to follow. Kevin Smith with Planning and Building Services. First, I'd like to point out we have many other members of the code enforcement team in the room, including representatives from zoning, building services, health, fire inspection, the planning office. And this is just some of us, including finance and the attorneys. So it's a very large group who comes together quite often to deal with challenges facing the entire city of Sioux Falls. And I understand from 2008 and since there's been quite a bit of attention paid to code enforcement. And it's, I would say, deservedly so, because it's very visible. It's very important to neighborhoods that we are out there as a group enforcing the ordinances that do exist for the city of Sioux Falls. But I'll be the first one to say that it is a very delicate balance between personal property rights and community standards. That for every phone call that you as city council members get in complaining about the city doing nothing, you probably get complaints from citizens saying, well, the city's coming down on me. I'm being treated unfairly. It depends. Did you make the complaint or did you receive the citation? I think you can just about guess by the tone of the individuals who may be calling you. That's the challenge our field staff and we face, is that we do want to allow people an opportunity to, once a violation is noticed, to correct it. So our goal is not, just like it is during snow events, our goal is not to see how many tickets we can write. Our goal is simply to have compliance with our ordinances. And if there are ordinances that need to be changed, that need to be added or removed, we'll be the first ones to review them. But as far as the ones that exist, we want people to comply with them. And if something has happened, case in point, a building burns down, house burns down, family loses a family member. So they're going through a fairly traumatic experience. Do the neighbors know about it? Maybe, maybe not. All they see is a burned out building or a building that needs to be demolished. Well, certainly we want to see the building demolished, but we also, I think, need to be sensitive to the needs of the property owner in that case. Now, that's dramatically different than someone who is just not going to comply with our ordinances, whether we issue them 1, 3, 5, or a dozen citations. If they're not going to pay, they're not going to pay. And that's, fortunately, when they get to meet City Attorney Dave Fifley and Assistant City Attorney Paul Bangford. And the three of us are, I'd say, probably the newest members of the code enforcement team. And hopefully what we've brought is our perspective on the process. And I really have enjoyed the last 8 months back in the planning department, getting to know some people a little more closely and spending time with some of you council members out in the field. But I can tell you first and foremost that the people involved in the process on our end take a lot of pride in our work. We are diligent. We want to do good things for the city of Sioux Falls, for all the citizens. But it's not a one-size-fits-all. That in some cases, an individual, maybe they get one notice of violation and they correct the problem, and we never hear about them again. There are other individuals who could be cited and cited and cited, and they're still not going to comply. And that's the challenge we face with the number of cases there are every year, is how to deal with people fairly, to be treated fairly, and on the complainant's side, to be treated as though someone's actually listening and doing something about it. So for the folks in the audience, for the benefit of the city council here, and for the folks watching, we do take this seriously. And hopefully this brief presentation will give you a flavor of where we have been in 2010 and more importantly, where we plan to go in 2011 and beyond. And I've given strict instructions to the people in the audience. If I'm about to say something that is in conflict with ordinance, they're supposed to come run up and correct me. So if you see that happening, you'll know why. The broad overview of code enforcement, as I said, Russ, in the next slide, is not just to be out in the field issuing citations, but the final word is compliance. Apparently the computer isn't going to comply with me either. But if I could move on, the internal coordination efforts that we've undertaken over the last year or so, we've gone from bi-monthly team meetings to monthly meetings because I personally want to know more about the process that's going on. And some of this is inside baseball, and these meetings aren't just to share information, but to discuss significant issues like Russ just talked about with the Whittier cleanup costs. What can we do to accommodate those folks? How can we be part of the solution for code enforcement, not just be the people who walk in and send out citations? We want to work with neighborhoods. The code enforcement intranet team site and the statistical information that we're tracking, we're actually at a pretty good place because in 2011 we made some changes very quickly with the help of Shauna Goldhammer from zoning to set up an area on Insight where everyone involved in the process internally can go to the same information, and we can track things much more in a much more coordinated fashion, so that rather than hearing from me just once a year to give you an annual update, we want to spend more time in front of the mayor and city council giving you regular updates. And if you ask us questions about how much has been collected in fines, what citations are outstanding, where are you at, that we don't have to say, well, wait till the end of the year and when we collect all that data, we'll tell you that it's on a much more regular basis. Now, the benefit is that to us internally, we get to ask the same questions of each other as well. And I'd say we're holding each other accountable too, so that we want the process to work just as importantly as the citizens want the process to work from their standpoint. So from an accountability point of view, we want to be as accountable to you as possible. Russ, if you could go to slide number 5, please. If I leave you with one number that you can recite off the top of your head to anyone, it is that in 85% of the violations in 2010, the complaint was resolved with just one notice to the complainant to the violating party. Now that means that of the 4,805 cases with violations, 4,000 of them complied after just one notice. That it didn't take a convoluted process, and it didn't take months and months and months. One letter. This is something you need to fix, and the person or the property owner took care of it. Now, in some of those other cases, 1,500 to be exact, we went out on inspections and found no violations. So, unfortunately, I guess from the point of view of some members of the public, Not every complaint is a violation. And just because something doesn't look the way you would do it doesn't mean it's a violation. But if there's one out there, you can see 4,800, that's a fairly large number. In a perfect world, we wouldn't have violations. In a great world, we'd have violations all resolved with just a letter from the city saying this is a violation, can you please take care of it within 10 days. In the world we live in, it takes a little longer than that. We do have people that will wait until they do get a citation and then ask for an extension and then won't follow through. And then we have to do a reinspection and go back. And it is a process. But at the end of the day, it's an important one to us as well. So we want to make sure we get out there when we hear about a problem. And for anyone who attended a recent employee forum back in the fall of 2010, when I was addressing all city employees, I asked them, when you see things in the field, call us. If you see overgrown weeds, if you see housing conditions that are problems, if you see cars that are parked places or garbage piling up, call us. We'd like to take care of it. So this isn't just a response only from the public. We expect all employees in the City of Sioux Falls to be part of the code enforcement process along with us because it's a big city, 75 square miles, lots of properties out there. We can't be everywhere at once, but certainly if there's something going on, we want to know about it. Next slide, please. So the money, always follow the money, they tell me. In 2010, total fines issued $183,000. Total fines collected, $82,000. Fines being collected, and I shouldn't say fines because right now they're back there gritting their teeth saying, Kevin, don't say fines. This is just money owed to the city, whether it was through a citation or in the case of weeds and nuisance cleanups on properties where we went out and physically did the work and are billing it back to the homeowner, property owner. It may not be a fine, but it is money that needs to be collected. And what I would really like you to focus on here is that all the money is being accounted for. So if it's work we did or had a contractor do, weed complaints, nuisance cleanups, sidewalk snow removal, you don't pay those costs, they go onto your property taxes. Other citations that go unpaid, that's where we get the city attorney's office involved. Some of those go to small claims court. If it's less than, I believe, $300, right now, Paul should be nodding his head. Yes, thank you, right on cue. Anything less than $300 goes to a collection agency. Bottom line is, though, if you receive a citation, please don't treat it like junk mail and tear it up because we do need that money paid. More importantly, though, you need to correct the violation. To me, if you pay a citation and don't collect the problem, that's not helping us. And these are very visual things, whether it's manufactured houses being placed where they shouldn't be or dilapidated structures that need to come down, whether we encourage the property owners to do it or do it ourselves. Next slide, please, Russ. And this is just a snapshot of the code enforcement site on the city's website. And right now, I think it could stand some updating, and that's what's going to be done over the course of the next several months. That one of the things that, not to jump ahead to the goals for 2011, but one of the things we really want to do is make it even easier for the public to let us know about violations. We know what is an unlicensed inoperable vehicle. Well, the public may just know that car's parked where it shouldn't be. And they shouldn't have to worry about who to call, or they shouldn't have to be concerned about, now, what email address am I supposed to be using? We want this to be as easy as possible, and we will follow up. So I hope you enjoy the way it looks now because the website is going to be changing in the next couple of months. The next page, although you can't read probably the names on there, these are the outstanding citations that have been issued in 2011. So if you have been fortunate or unfortunate enough to receive a citation from us, it's out on the website right now. And this is information that will continue to be out there throughout the year. And this is something we're going to talk about every month at our code enforcement meetings is, do we have everything up to date? Now, this is not unique to the profession of code enforcement to put this kind of information out there. Some communities go to a great extent deeper than we do in putting information out there. If there are changes, and Mike Cooper, Ron Bell, and I recently gave a presentation to South Dakota Multi-Housing Association, and I asked them, well, do we need to have more? Do you want to see more information? What is it we can provide that's meaningful for you? So we're willing to change. We just want to make whatever's out there helpful. And to the benefit of the property owners, we want to give them ample time to make it right. But if you've gotten a citation, in my opinion, you've had time. So if you don't, well, you'll probably see your name here and ultimately maybe get to meet Mr. Fifley or Mr. Bankford in person. They're nice people, though. The next thing is the Who to Contact brochure. This is assembled annually by the Health Department. Luann Ford really is part of the Project Nice and Project Keep program distributes this. Again, with a lot of the other things we're going to be doing with code enforcement over the next year, we're going to standardize the message so it's easier for people to find. Should you have to spend a lot of time figuring out who to call? No, you shouldn't. It should be a very simple process. Luann's done a great job of getting after the rest of us to keep this updated. What we want to do now is kind of overarching, have people get used to seeing code enforcement not as individual departments, not as the health department or necessarily fire rescue or building services or zoning, but just to think of code enforcement as a group. Next page, please. And I think people are finding us. Through the helpline in 2010, there were nearly 7,500 calls received and transferred to the appropriate city and county departments for follow-up. This is just a summary of a majority of them that came to us, 4,200 calls. Now, not all of these were code enforcement, but the concept of the public having access to the 211 system anytime is really nice, because you as a caller, you don't have to know. Who am I supposed to talk to? You just call and tell them what your problem is. They'll help you find us. And the next page, Russ, is the online complaints. Again, we had a record number in 2010. I think a lot of that it had to do with sidewalk snow removal and other things that were going on. But the sheer numbers, nearly 3,000 emails that came in, mean that people are using the system. And no, they don't always send the email to the right department. And when I was in Public Works, I would routinely get emails that began with, I'm not sure if this is the right department, but ... whatever the issue was. Well, if it wasn't meant for Public Works, I had a pretty good idea who it needed to go to, and I could quickly forward it to that individual or that department. We do want people to use 367 8000. We do want people to use siouxfalls.org, but there's also other technologies coming out that are going to make it even easier for people to let us know about code violations and complaints. Now, that's kind of the statistical side of code enforcement, but looking forward and to borrow the philosophy of fire prevention and police prevention, crime prevention. You don't wait until there's a problem to respond. I think we can do more with neighborhoods rather than waiting until a neighborhood has become such a problem area that we have to go in and make dramatic changes, do drastic things. That means we've waited too long, and that has happened, and we don't want to see it happen again. But we also know that the neighborhoods need to be part of that solution. Pettigrew Heights and Whittier are very good examples of neighborhoods that have kind of used a hand up and not a hand out, that they don't expect the city to do everything for them. They're somewhat self-sustained. And those of you that have driven through those neighborhoods know, or if you interact with them, they're very proud of where they live now. Some of those residents are taking on more responsibility themselves. That's great for us because we can do a lot, but if it's through a hammer and not a carrot, then sometimes it is harder to get compliance. Rather than telling them it's the right thing to do, sometimes we have to use a little more gentle urging. I mentioned Project Nice and Keep a little bit. I really don't know where the city would be without having Project Nice and Keep, especially in the core neighborhoods, because if you just look at the sheer numbers from 2010, the number of loads and tons of material that are taken out of those neighborhoods, it's incredible. If we were to do this only through enforcement activities, only through enforcement, it'd be, and sometimes it seems like it would be a never-ending struggle. These are very good programs. We do want to build on those neighborhood relationships with code enforcement. So just like very recently, we did go out and meet with a cathedral district. There are other things they can do as neighborhoods themselves that they don't even need to involve us. Like the third annual Pettigrew Heights neighborhood cleanup and fall harvest, the annual Whittier cleanup. These are things that we can provide some resources, but unless and until those neighborhoods, however you define a neighborhood, decide this is something they're going to be part of, we're only going to be half as successful as we could be. So looking forward, one of the things we want to do more as a code enforcement team is spend time with these folks. Not saying we're from the government, we're here to help, here's all the programs, one size fits all, but rather maybe listen first, see what their problems are, see what tool they need. Don't give them a screwdriver if they need a hammer, and vice versa. That we need to spend more time listening to the needs of these neighborhoods. And sometimes in the next one, like the North Main Avenue area cleanup, this is something that Luann and I think Rich Steffen from the street department saw when they were looking at Project Nice areas, an entire hillside littered with debris, evidence of homeless activity, and I think they eventually found drug paraphernalia down there as well, that this was something larger than a neighborhood could clean up. And we didn't hold the neighborhood responsible, but because we had volunteers from parks and fire and public works all come together, we quickly went in within the span of about 10 days, hauled out 40 dump truck loads of material from an area most people have never seen. And the reason we were back there is because it's an area most people have never seen, but the people that have been habitating back there. So our role is to come in situations like this. When it needs the big equipment, lots of people mobilized, we can come in there. But also, Parks is going to go back this spring, spray this entire area down so it doesn't become overgrown, so it isn't a hiding place. It's now known by the police department, so they can spend a little more time looking up there if there's suspicious activity. That's the other part of code enforcement. It's not just about citations. It is about cleaning up neighborhoods, making neighborhoods better. Nobody came to us and said, you need to go clean this up. It's something we saw, we went out and did very quickly, and as far as tactical strikes go, this one went very well. The next project is something that's going to be occurring very soon, and I think Russ is going to have a news release out on this very quickly. Great example of where those of us involved in code enforcement, neighborhood revitalization, and crime prevention met with a couple of city council members. I believe Bob, Kenny, and Rex were there last fall at a cathedral neighborhood meeting, and we talked about a wide variety of things. We listened to what the neighbors had to say, and one of the things that came up was the poorly lit alleys. You overlay that with the crime statistics, and it's hard to argue that that we didn't need to take a look at having additional lighting there. So, long story short, the light division got involved. We spent time with the neighbors out there, picked a very cold night in January to drive down the alleys and look for areas where we could install additional city streetlights. Now, typically, the city does not light alleys, but in this case, because that's the tool that was needed for the neighborhood. That's what's going to happen. So 24 new alley lights are going to be installed this spring. Didn't take a lot of effort to listen to the neighbors and see what their issues were. Is Mike Burkhardt going to have to take time away from something else to go do it? Sure, but we're using existing utility poles. We're using materials that he has actually salvaged from other projects and saved. So 24 lights, probably less than $2,500 total in materials. Just to give you a sense of scale or perspective, one brand new historic street light, the nice candlestick green ones, fully installed, about $5,000. If you're going to do the underground wiring, we're putting in 24 of these to meet the needs of the neighborhood. And the great thing is, the last meeting we had, I think it was last week, the neighborhood's talking about an alley beautification project of their own. My gosh, they're going to go out this spring and clean up the alley and maybe make it less attractive for people to hide, maybe cut down on crime. So we do our job. We can come in and hang lights. They do their job, clean up the alley, maybe do a little bit of self-policing, and it becomes a better neighborhood. It's a little more sustainable that way. A Brush with Kindness program. This is something that was new last year. For the neighborhoods that haven't been involved, I would encourage you to contact folks like Russ Sorensen and see what you can do to get in on this, where volunteers go out and will paint homes, and if you pay close attention to the images, they also fixed up the porch. They probably cut down some vegetation. Guess what? Some of those might have been housing code violations that they took care of. So rather than, again, making it a citation and you will fix this or else situation, volunteer efforts. If we can partner with them more to help homeowners understand what options are out there for them, great for everybody. Hopefully that's a program that exists well into the future. The next slide, Russ, is we don't set a goal for the number of structures that get demolished every year, but in 2010, there were 24 buildings, 24 structures that came down, some more notable than others. Is it a long process to see a property brought down? Sometimes, yes, it is. Generally speaking, from the time Ron Bell's staff issue a notice and order on it, it could take up to 18 months if we're the ones who have to bring the building down. Every one of these structures was demolished through the use of private funds. We didn't have to do the demolitions and assess the cost back in any one of these, which is, I think, pretty phenomenal. We're prepared to if we get to that point. That's why you see in our annual budget building demolition costs. If we have to do this work, that's where the money goes. More importantly, there was one up near Cliff Avenue, an abandoned vacant grocery store, where the property owner was contacted in less than 2 months, I would say. They brought the structure down and it was gone. So if you hear from people who say, oh, it takes forever to get things done. Well, if we have to do it through a citation compliance contractor, street department, whoever process to do it, it can take a while. If the property owner has the means and is willing to, it can happen in a very short amount of time. Part of me says this isn't a great number because at one time all of these buildings were brand new. They were in nice condition. To the extent that we can prevent this from happening more, I'd love to see it. I'd love to see fewer houses have to be demolished because they got to that state, because it does drive the neighbors crazy and it drives us crazy too. What's on the horizon? The next slide of foreclosure tracking. It's happened elsewhere across the United States. Sioux Falls is not immune to foreclosures. And yes, there is somewhat of a concentration in the central part of Sioux Falls, but just visually take a look at it. Foreclosures are not occurring just within central Sioux Falls, just within some core neighborhoods. The concern we have is what happens after a foreclosure. Do these buildings stay unoccupied? Or do you start to see the broken window syndrome where one window is broken, nobody fixes it, and pretty soon all the windows are broken out of a house? We don't want to see that happen in Sioux Falls. So This is something that I would say it's an area of concern for us because we don't want to see more houses become vacant, become problems for the neighborhood, and ultimately problems for the code enforcement people in the field. But it is something we're looking at. It's something we track, and hopefully this number is lower in 2011. But in 2008, I believe there were 251 locations. 2009, it was 219, and in 2010, it was 292. So if we're on the back end of the wave of the foreclosures, maybe 2010 was a peak. But not to foreshadow to the ending of my presentation, but we'll be spending more time talking to you about these things on a more regular basis than just once a year like I am right now. So if there's issues out there, we want to have dialogues with the neighborhoods. We want to have more contact with our elected officials, especially if there's things you're seeing within your districts or the city at large. And the very final page, I'm not going to go through every single goal, but overarching, timely enforcement and compliance, simplifying the complaint submittal process, unifying and streamlining the response to the citizen needs, and increasing voluntary compliance. These are things I think there's a lot of work we can accomplish, a lot we can do, but common theme to my presentation is the neighborhoods have to be part of this, that we need to spend more time with them, seeing what the issues are, coming up with a response, and internally following through. I think that's what it all boils down to, is so that the people who call us and email us feel like somebody has listened to them on the other end and that we're doing something, and that the people who may have been in receipt of a notice of violation letter or a citation, that they feel they are given an adequate opportunity to comply. And if they don't, we go to Plan B. But it is something that we all work very hard at, and will continue to in the future. There are things like smartphone technology where if you have a GPS-enabled phone, you can take a picture of something in the field and just hit send. It can come to us with the right software, and it's already geocoded. So with our GIS system, we can send inspectors out right to that spot. You don't even have to type in the address or tell us what the problem is. You just send an image to us. Other communities have gotten there. I think we're very close, and that's just one more way to streamline the process for our citizens. You shouldn't have to think about it. If you see something that's out of place, let us know. If it's not a violation, it's not a violation. But if it is, we want to know about it so we can get it corrected. And again, 85% of those 4,805 violations were corrected with one notice. It didn't take months and months and months, years and years and years, as I think sometimes the public's perception of the process is. The challenge is with those 15%, some of those do take longer, but with the benefit of the legal staff that we have, I think we're making great headway in those issues. So with that, I'll conclude my presentation.
Councillor Brown.
First of all, Kevin, thank you for listening, because, as you know, this has been an area of interest for mine and the council for a long time, and clearly you've listened. It's customer focused, you have clear goals, and I appreciate that. A couple of questions. First of all, that 15% that we deal with that takes more than one notice, do we need ordinance changes that takes care of those that are gaming the system?
You know, right now, Councillor Brown, I would say us following through more quickly on some of those, that not every case is a 3 strikes and you're out. There have been very recent instances, and maybe Paul or Dave can speak to these, but if we know someone's not going to comply given their behavior, it's not going to take 3 citations before they find their way to court. So I don't know that we necessarily at the moment need ordinance changes strictly for that. There are other ordinance changes we're going to be looking at, especially with mobile homes, placements, inspections, things like that. But sometimes it's just using the tools we have available.
And there may be even legislative changes that you might need to when we get to property rights.
Some of those, yes, especially with the citations where we haven't actually gone out and done work that can be assessed to properties.
Then my other question is, are we covering our costs of citation?
That's a tough one. I would question whether we are or not. But case in point, the rental housing registration program, which I know is important to the city council, there isn't even a fee for processing it. And we have now at least a couple of our administrative staff just working on putting those in. And if we get to the point of, heaven forbid, having to revoke rental permits, then I would say we should be looking at charging for those, or at least recouping our costs.
We'll let the council know when you're ready to examine those, because I think that we'd be willing to consider that.
Certainly.
But thank you. I think I've told you of all the emails or phone calls and contacts I get, this issue generates more of that than any other single issue. And I think just giving the customer service that you're talking about is going to help resolve that.
Councillor Intiman.
Thank you. You did answer a few questions for me, but I do have a few more. How many code enforcement people do we have?
We have a code enforcement officer in building services, and there's also a code enforcement officer in health. We have quite a few inspection staff, though. So
Okay.
if you're asking just number of code enforcement officers, just a couple.
Just a couple, because I noticed you had about 4,200 referrals coming into the 10 different departments that have broke down. So you're saying that code enforcement then is pretty much centralized?
Well, that's a tough one, because zoning, housing, building services, health, parks and recreation, they are all part of the process. Parks and recreation, for example, up until now, up until this year, they've managed the weed control program. We're going to be transferring that over to Ron Bell's group, so that is going to be part of code enforcement. We do use a part-time person to help with inspections there. So I would say it is centralized in the view that we all are kind of playing by the same rules when it comes to dealing with property owners and the public. But as it being centralized in a department, no, because there are many different departments with many specific things they're responsible for. So, and I don't know that that necessarily answers your question.
If a citation is issued, is there an appeal process that citizen has?
Yes, there is.
Can you explain that just a little bit for me, Kevin, please?
Well, I guess I would probably defer to the city attorney's office for the appeal process, but you are given an ample opportunity to contact us after you receive the notice of violation, and after you receive a citation. There are means you can go through if you feel you have been wronged. The first thing I would say is get a hold of the issuing party of either the notice of violation letter or the citation. But Dave, I don't know if you want to tackle that question, or Paul, as far as the appeal process itself.
Councilor Paul Bangford with the City Attorney's Office. As Kevin indicated, 85% of those come into compliance with just the notice of violation. So there's 14 days to comply. Generally, health or the other departments, if somebody calls and says, hey, look, I've got a problem here, it's going to take me 17 days to take care of it, or 20 days to take care of it. They'll work with that internally. If it goes beyond that 14 days, somebody will go out and reinspect. And at that point, in most cases, we issue, the first citation is issued. And the first citation is $100, second is $200, third is $300. The citation itself indicates that they have 10 days to file an appeal. If they disagree that with the citation, they don't think they're in violation, they have 10 days to file an appeal. That's handled internally. It can be either, there's two ways we can have a hearing on that. One is with a hearing officer with the City of Sioux Falls, and we don't currently have a hearing officer. But the other way is a 3-director panel that hears the appeal, You have 10 days to file the notice of appeal, and then within 15 working days after that, then the appeal will be heard. Now, when I say that most of the time that is done through the citation process, the ordinance actually just requires the 14 days notice. We have found that different people will comply in different ways, and what we're trying to get here is primarily compliance. If it's the first time we've dealt with somebody, we usually will go through the 3 citation process. And this is to answer your question, Councilor Brown, whether we need more rules or regulations to respond to or change an ordinance. The ordinance allows us to decide on a daily basis. That is not something that we generally do, or I'm not sure if we have done it in the past, not since November when I've been here. Generally what we do is we issue the first citation. They have 10 days to appeal, and so we generally don't issue a second citation until that 10 days is up to see if they have an issue or if they disagree with it. Then after the 10 days, there will be a reinspection, and they'll follow. Now, there are certain people who we know aren't going to comply no matter what. We know that from past experience, and we know that their position is, this is my property, who's the City of Sioux Falls to tell me what I can do with it? One thing that we have implemented recently, and it's something that was done in the past but we went away from for a few years, is we're also starting to bring some of these to magistrate court. Because we find that some people will comply once the citations start to pile up. Some people don't care because they're not going to pay the citations and they're not worried about that anyway. But we found through the magistrate process that some people who maybe aren't interested in the citations, once they know that they're going to be in front of a judge, have a different opinion on it. And so just to give you some anecdotal evidence, we had an individual recently who paid $1,200 worth of citations, just kept the car on blocks in the yard. But once they got the notice that they were going to court, immediately contacted our office, resolved the case, and removed the car. So, that happens with some as well. Ultimately, if we need to, if the court process or the citation process doesn't work, we file for an injunction. That's a last resort. Nobody wants to be there. But we seek an injunction against the property where, look, we've given you every opportunity to take care of it. You're not doing it. And so ultimately then the court has ordered us in some of those cases that once these nuisances pile up, we can go clean it up and it gets assessed against the property. There's one property in particular I'm thinking of that we have an injunction against, and I think we go out to it 3 or 4 times a year, clean it up, and assess it back against the property. So that's the last case scenario in the chain, the injunction. We don't get there very often, certainly try to avoid it, but we have found that the different people will comply in different ways, some through the financial, some through the court system, and ultimately, if none of that works, we do it through an injunction process. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks. Kevin, I do have one other, if you don't mind. I know that you've been working on a couple of ordinances, and you've been reviewing the ordinances, and that's what the question I guess I have is for the citizens out there, that are you actively looking at ordinances to make sure that they are relevant today, that
Yes.
they make sense for us and for our citizens?
Yeah, if we have an ordinance, it needs to be enforceable. And if it's unenforceable, we'll be back in front of you talking about it, regardless of what it is. But if there's an ordinance in place, we do need to enforce it. So that's why I think we need a lot of communication about what's working out there, what's not, what indicators are we seeing for violations, and what changes do we need to make. Now, we wouldn't bring forward ordinance modifications unless we felt they were necessary, but I think we've seen some things, whether it's with manufactured housing or whatever else, that sometimes it is necessary. But I also understand if we're not looking, who else is going to? We're the ones dealing with them every day. Ron Bell updates building codes on a fairly regular basis because that's the way the industry works. Not so much so in other parts of code enforcement, but I guess the long answer to the short question is yes, we do, and we will.
Good. Thank you.
Any other questions for Kevin? Kevin, I would just like to publicly acknowledge the mayor and his efforts of moving you to that department. I think that's a great move. I think that department needs a guy like you. And one of the last things I remember was reviewing that org chart. Remember on our audit committee when we tried to figure out how things got done? And it seemed very complicated. I've come to understand that it is very complicated, and you work with a lot of different departments, and I just think it's a very good move to have you there, and I just wanted to acknowledge that I think the mayor did a good job moving you there.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Kevin. Next, we have a very special presentation. I know this is what everybody's been waiting for. The highlight of the evening, we have a update on the National League of City Conferences that Councilors Sue Aguilar and Michelle Eppenbach and Kenny Anderson Jr. both attended in, where was it?
Savannah, Georgia.
Savannah, Georgia.
Thank you, Council Chair. I, at the last minute, realized I was having technical issues, and so Tamara's going to bail me out real quick. My partners in crime, Councilor Aguilar and Councilor Anderson, are going to help us answer questions as we go along, but I was just going to briefly run through some of the things that we did, some of the experiences that we had. We did attend a National League of Cities conference in Savannah, Georgia. It was rainy and it was cold. It was 53 degrees when we were there, and so we did spend very little time outside, lots of time inside, learning all kinds of interesting things. I have just a brief PowerPoint that I want to just run through with you. Thank you. Tamara's awesome. Thank you very much. As I said, we did meet in Savannah, Georgia for a couple of days in February. We have had tons of information, and I wanted to bring this up here so that you could see the amount of information we came back with, the amount of information that was mailed to us then later, and that we came back that week and met right away with community development people. Darren Smith and Erica Beck both sat and listened to us all chatter with all the information that we had and tried to share with them, and so we just appreciate that. Speakers were from a variety of national think tanks and large universities. Participants were really from all size communities from all across the country, and we could relate to some of them, and others were just way out of our league, so it was really interesting to be there. Do you want me to move the slides, or can you do it? Awesome, go ahead. As I said, we did meet with Darren Smith and Erica Beck in community development and shared all of our information with them. They've actually copied the materials that we have. If you go to the second slide, I wanted to show you the event center that we were in, the convention center that we were in, had this wonderful glass wall, and we learned part of our tour on the last day was of the port in Savannah, and it is the 4th largest container port in the United States. And there's an 18-mile river, the Savannah River, that runs between the ocean, obviously, and the port. And this convention center butts up right next to the river and has these wonderful glass walls. And we spent a lot of time focusing, focus on those speakers, focus on the speakers. And then a ship would go by and you'd go, ship, ship. And everyone in the room would look, ship, ship. And they were enormous. And so that's sort of an example of what the ships were like. But it was an exciting place to be in terms of the size of Savannah and the ability, the different things that they have done in terms of economic development, but then to learn that there are a lot of things that Sioux Falls has done also that are equally good and equally exciting. Next slide for me, please. You'll start to see us incorporating many of these ideas into conversation. You're going to see it actually in the Land Use Committee today. We're going to start doing some visioning about what does it mean to be involved with economic development, and what does it mean as elected officials to be involved in economic development. We're going to keep this informal. If you go ahead and switch for me, please. There were 3 really goals, 3 really things that we learned. Number 1, and I want all of us to understand that, everyone that's watching us, everyone that's listening in the room, Sioux Falls is doing lots of things right in terms of economic development. It was amazing to be presented with all this information and go, oh yeah, check, we do that. Oh yeah, we do that, check. It was great to be able to say that. Second, as elected officials, and that's who this really was pointed at, as elected officials, we really can play a role in that entrepreneurial spirit that is the foundation of the economic development process. And third, all of us, citizens, department heads, employees, everyone has a role to play in economic development in Sioux Falls and in our region. Next slide, please. There are ongoing concerns about the recovery of the job market. We're all aware of that. We've just now looked at some of the foreclosure numbers in Sioux Falls. But we need to provide a vision for preserving and growing our investment. We have to salvage and maintain our long-term investments. Next slide, please. Speakers encouraged us to bring more leaders, more people to the table when we talk about economic development. They talked about local colleges and tech schools as being key when we're talking about jobs and job training. And we talked about the idea of empowering and encouraging local businesses to be involved with job training, targeting new jobs, and that we're going to focus on growth. That economic development is not always just about inviting folks in, it really is about growing our own. If you can go to the next slide, please. This slide kind of speaks for itself. Government is important in economic development, but it is not the most important player. Cities must focus on doing what cities do best. And I have to say that to my council colleagues. Our job is to provide quality services and amenities. That is what attracts businesses. That is what grows businesses. Next slide, please. You'll hear us, the three of us, and others talking more about one-stop shopping. And I think Kevin has kind of alluded to that in his report. We're going to talk more about economic development concierge service. We're going to talk more about how can we make it easier for businesses to grow? How can we encourage new businesses to come and make it easier for growth and development to happen? And definitely what we have to do is define our values. We have to decide who it is that Sioux Falls is. And I think we have a pretty good handle on that. But we need to understand that and live it at all times. And then we need to, as I said, structure our systems so that they're nimble and responsive. When we have someone coming in that wants to see Sioux Falls or is interested in Sioux Falls, we need to be able to respond to them and be helpful in that way. Next slide, please. This one is important too, and speaks for itself. We need to not be so short-sighted that we're always doing triage. Yes, we're in a difficult economic times, but we cannot always be focusing on what's so bad. We need to position Sioux Falls and the region to take advantage of a rebounding economy that we know is coming. Next slide, please. Too often economic development focuses only on these short-term goals: job creation, private investment, tax base expansion. Of course these are important, and of course that's part of it, but they are only short-term goals. Next slide. As elected officials, we need to help our leaders focus economic development efforts on long-term goals for all citizens. Look at these long-term goals: wealth creation, a higher quality of life, and a higher standard for living. And it's not just for a certain few, it is for all citizens in Sioux Falls. Those are our long-term goals. Next slide. Economic development doesn't happen anywhere but here. Most important person on the economic development team is the mayor. Next slide, please. Place is more important than ever. If we continue to see ourselves as only a cheap place to do business, we have entered and we're winning the race to the bottom. There's so much more. Next slide. Existing companies have more impact on the local economy, and business retention is the most significant source of new jobs and new investment. Let me say that again. Existing companies have more impact on the local economy. Business retention is the most significant source of new jobs and new investment. Next slide. And again, speaking to us as elected officials, we need to understand that we need to understand that there is a migration of jobs from larger companies to smaller companies. We need to understand that there is a mix, and we have to be able to serve all of those companies. It's really our role as elected officials to make sure there's a balanced portfolio. And again, it's one of those things where you can kind of go, yeah, check, done. But we have to keep it at the forefront all the time, that we are always serving all the businesses in Sioux Falls. Next slide. It's also our role to foster a culture of entrepreneurship. And I think that you have to understand that that culture is started from the top. And we have to become storytellers. We have to be able to sell our community not only to folks from the outside, but to ourselves and to each other and to those businesses that we know are so important. We have to remember that there is a continuum of businesses in our city and our region. From brand new startups that we're all excited about to those long-term economic drivers, we must foster a culture that serves them all and provides for their needs. Next slide. We cannot talk about economic development without addressing the issue of poverty. the speakers that we had were from a broad range of think tanks in terms of economic development. They talked a lot about home ownership support, talked about job training, caring for the disenfranchised. And the quote that stuck with me and still sticks with me, and I want you to remember this because we're going to live it, we're going to breathe it. Teen pregnancy is the fastest road to poverty. That means economic development is not just in the hands of businesses. It is in the hands of the service providers and the nonprofits in this community. And their leaders are as important at the economic development table as anyone else in the community. For me, it helps me define who it is that's at that economic development table. There are human services, nonprofits, faith-based organizations. They all play a role. And next slide, please. Again, it's easy to get caught up in the crisis. We're scared. It's dramatic. We need to continue that tradition that we have of planning at least 10 years. You know, we look at Shape Sioux Falls 2035. It's way more than 10 years down the road that we're looking at what Sioux Falls is going to be like. But we need to be flexible. We need to be ready to act. And we, as elected officials, need to become entrepreneurs at all levels of government and in all city departments. And next slide. And I speak for all of us, I think, to thank you for the opportunity. It was an amazing experience. We're so full of information right now. I haven't read half this stuff, but I'm so excited about it, I can hardly stand it. I want it to be part of who we are as leaders, as elected officials. It was a powerful experience, and it really is foundational to who we are as an elected body. That if we can understand the story and understand what it is that we need to do to help our city, economic development is going to happen. Questions, and will you two jump in?
Questions or comments, additional thoughts? Councilor Rolfing.
I need to hear that, excuse me, I need to hear that quote about teen pregnancy again.
Teen pregnancy is the fastest road to poverty. And we cannot be about economic development if we don't address poverty in our community, if we don't address job training, home ownership, education. It won't happen.
Councilor Aguilar.
Councilor Erfenbach did a very fine job in summarizing what we learned, and I thank her for putting the presentation together. As she said at the beginning, one of the things that we found to be heartwarming was all the things that Sioux Falls is doing right. They talked in the beginning about what is the new normal, and it's very much what we're seeing here. Local government was seeing a 7 to 8% growth, and now it's about a 3.8%. One of the things that I found very interesting by one of the presenters was demography equals destiny, and we don't want to become Japan. 8,000 baby boomers will be reaching 65 every day for the next 20 years. And how is that going to affect our economy? It was a wonderful experience. As Michelle said, we met some great people. Some of them we could relate to what was happening within their cities, some not so much. But I do thank the council for allowing me to be a participant.
I also want to thank the council and the citizens of Sioux Falls for allowing us to take this trip. I think that one of the things that it really taught us is that, as Michelle said in her presentation, that we are doing a lot of things very well here. Community development, Darren Smith, the mayor, the administration, you guys are doing a wonderful job at trying to work with our development foundations and bringing new business into Sioux Falls. But the other thing I noticed in conversations with other city leaders is things that they are looking at doing, we're already doing. The best example was, I believe it was Charlotte, North Carolina, was talking about a new process where methane gas is collected at a landfill. And they were looking at using this process to supply heat for an artist camp. And I had to speak up at that time because we've been doing that for some time now. And as soon as a few of the community leaders had found that out, they did, on our first break, they came right over and were asking a lot of questions and wanted contact information. And, you know, these are some of the things that are so great about these type of seminars is that you get to network with other city officials from all over the country. There were people there from Seattle, Washington. There were people there from California, Maine, Massachusetts. And to learn how some of these other cities do processing, whether it's code enforcement or just assisting a new business coming into the city. These are things that you find out what the differences are, and are there things that we can do better here. But the last thing on this that I found that was very important was that when we talk about economic development, about bringing more people to the table so there's more voices there, and that economic development involves everyone. You know, if you're on the road on a vacation or on a trip to another city and you talk about our city, that's economic development. So I hope that everyone, if they have questions, please give us a call and we'll try to answer them. But I think it was a great seminar, and I think all three of us came back very energized to try to continue doing things that we feel are going to be good for the city.
Very good, Michelle. Thank you. You've raised the bar now for everybody else who needs to.
Well, you know, I was going to challenge my colleagues on the council that, you know, these sorts of things really do open us up to conversation. You know, that if we can see beyond just our little place right here, you know, there are opportunities for us to do this in lots of ways, and so I appreciate that.
Is there a way that you can open up that presentation again? I just wanted to show the first picture there. As we talk about our River Greenway and the different ideals that we look at with our River Greenway as an example, we've talked about San Antonio. Last year I also had an opportunity to go to Shreveport, Louisiana, which also has a River Greenway. It's about a 5-block area that's about 2 blocks wide along their river that has shops and businesses and everything. This photo here shows what Savannah is called the River Street. This is a very famous street here. They have a St. Patty's Day celebration like no other. But when you want to talk about our River Greenway, here's shops, businesses. They do have traffic during the regular days and everything, but on their special events, they don't allow traffic in this area. But as we talk about developing along our river, here's something that you can look at that could give you ideals of what our river could be like too. I'm not saying we're going to have the big paddle boats or anything like that in there, but I mean, as we look at developing our River Greenway in a smaller way, here's a good picture of giving you an ideal of what could happen.
Yeah, this picture doesn't include the yacht that was sort of out of this line of sight, too. It's a pretty cool place. There's also streetcars that run up and down that stretch of cobblestone there. And it is multi-use development in that area. There are people living up above the storefronts and the offices that are in that area.
Councilor Litz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to thank you three colleagues for going there. Those are days out of your life. You're not going to get them back, but you've brought something back to this community, some ideas and some reassurances that we are doing things right. It's appreciated. And, you know, I just want to say that you did remark on the weather. Everybody assumes when you're down there you're parasailing out in the bay and golfing and stuff. But by the time you're done with this day, you might last till 8 or 9 o'clock for the social thing, and you turn it in and go back. A lot of people don't know that. And, you know, during these times of constricting budgets for governments, these are a lot of the first things to go, are these training sessions and seminars and conferences that we send people out to go to. I know I've been paying attention to the county, and that's one of the places they like to hit. And I'm a little uneasy with that because I think that's an investment that municipalities and governments have to make in their employees. It's part of the education process, and it's part of where we get these ideas from. So with that, thanks for going there, and an excellent presentation. You must have stood in front of the mirror quite a while.
Councilor Anderson.
Last thing, Michelle, I would also like you to talk about the toolkit.
I haven't looked at it very much, but I would talk just a little bit about Northeastern University and the speaker from there, Barry Bluestone, who they actually have developed, it's the Kitty and Michael Dukakis Center for Urban and Regional Policy, has developed a toolkit of economic development materials, and as I said earlier, we gave the copies of this to our community development folks. But one of the things that this center has done is created a survey where they'll bring in to a community of any size to bring in some experts. They'll do several question survey in a sort of an interactive way, and they'll spend quite a bit of time with the community leaders and then kind of break down for them what it is, where are the needs, what is it that we're looking forward to, what sorts of things need to be changed. And we have started conversations with Darren and Erica, not to put them on the spot, but about the possibility of this happening. Certainly we do quality of life surveys. We're doing a recreational survey through the park system at this point. But to do that from an economic development standpoint and do it with someone of the caliber of this particular agency who has no vested interest in it, they're not going to sell us a product afterwards, would be, we think, really valuable to the community, and we hope that we're able to make that happen. It turns out that Mr. Bluestone, the director of the program, also has South Dakota ties, and he's very excited to come back to Sioux Falls, so it'll be good.
Did Darren or Erica, your office, want to comment on this?
We're kind of in the conversation stages yet, but you sure can.
You're only putting us on the spot if it's a bad idea. We think it's a good idea. So certainly we'll reach out and see if we can arrange to bring them in, because we have looked a little bit beyond talking to Michelle and Sue and Kenny about this. We have done a little looking into it, and again, think it'd be a really good idea and a neat opportunity for the community. So I think it's something we'll press ahead with.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We do have a, well, is there anything else from any of the councilors? We do have a committee meeting following this meeting. It is our land use committee. Michelle Eppenbach is the chair. Would the chair like to add any comments about our upcoming committee meeting?
It will kind of dovetail on what we've been just talking about in terms of part of what's happening is this committee, the land use committee, is kind of defining what our role is and what our goals are as a committee. And so we're going to do a lot of conversations. There are 4 or 5 items on the agenda, but most of it is conversation and visioning, and we're going to kind of open it up to some serious discussions. So I'd invite you to stay if you're interested, but we need to take a break just a little bit for Tamara to switch things around. Very good. Tamara has asked for 7 minutes to get set up, so if we could start the land use at 5:35, that would be a start time. Anything else? We are adjourned then. Thank you.